Now, for being just a simple piece of steel, card scrapers have a lot of great uses in the shop. You can use these on highly figured woods where you might get a lot of tear out using a hand plane. You can use these to remove glue squeeze out or old finishes, and you can even greatly reduce or completely eliminate the need for sanding. Now, one thing that a lot of people struggle with, including myself, is how to properly sharpen this so that you get curly shavings and not just a pile of dust. So the first thing we want to do is refresh the edge of this scraper. And I'm going to do that using this smooth mill file. You just want to take it in both hands and hold it as flat as you can on the surface of the scraper and just give it a couple of swipes. It really doesn't take much, just a couple of passes to remove that first layer of metal. Now, after a couple of passes, you'll feel that you've already got a burr forming on the edge of the scraper. Some people will use this as is. However, this isn't the type of burr that we want to use. This is going to be pretty rough and jagged, and it's not going to leave the really smooth surface that scrapers are really known for. So we're going to take this over to our polishing stones and smooth this out. Now, to square up and polish the edges of the card scraper, I'm going to use my set of diamond stones. Now, if you don't have diamond stones, of course, you don't have to have them for this. You can use water stones, oil stones, or even just something flat with some very fine sandpaper on it. Just anything that you can do to get a highly polished surface on here is what you're going to need. I do recommend you have a square block of scrap that you can use as a guide to keep the scraper at a perfect 90 degrees while we're using it on the stones. So I'm going to start here with the coarsest stone, and you want to put the block and the scraper perpendicular to your stone, and I'm going to move this back and forth so that it's not sitting and rubbing in one spot and wearing out the stone. You want to make sure you're using even pressure across the scraper. You don't want to wallow it out on one side or make a curved bottom to it. So just keep it moving. You'll get a good 20 or 30 swipes back and forth on this. Should be plenty to remove all those file marks. Just try to pick up some reflections of the light and see if you've got any more mill marks left. And just a couple more passes. All right, that looks good. Now we want to lay it on its side, and we'll use the block to keep it flat and even pressure all the way across the edge of the scraper. And just a couple of swipes here to remove that burr. Because again, that's not the type of burr that we want right now. We'll do that in a few minutes. Now we'll just proceed up to the next grit and do the exact same thing. And the final grit. And once you're done with that, I recommend knocking down these corners a little bit because these can get kind of sharp. You might cut your hands or gouge into your wood. So just a couple of swipes to round these over a little bit. There, much better. So now that we've got the edge of our scraper perfectly square and polished, it's time to create the hook, and that's going to be the cutting edge for our scraper. And to do this, you're going to need a burnishing rod. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people say that you can do this with just a simple screwdriver. And once upon a time, that was true. However, these days, most screwdrivers are made with cheaper and much softer material that's not going to work well for this purpose. And so unless you have an old screwdriver that was made of actual tool steel, and those are pretty rare these days, you're a lot better off just paying the few bucks and getting a good quality burnishing rod. All right, so I've got the scraper on the edge of the bench here, and I've got my burnishing rod. Now I want to add just a little bit of oil to the rod, and this is going to make it reduce the friction. It's also going to make it a little bit easier to manipulate the steel. So with the scraper on the edge of the bench here, I'm going to apply kind of a moderate amount of pressure here, and I'm going to dip the rod just a little bit beyond completely parallel with the scraper. So just barely a little angle, and I'm going to pull through, and I'm trying to just draw out the steel on the edge of the scraper. And I'm going to do this about 6 or 8 times. You can go away from you as well. Really doesn't matter. Just try to maintain that angle and keep the pressure the same. You want to create a consistent burr all the way across the edge. So once you've done 6 or 8 swipes on this side, flip it over and go ahead and do the other side of the scraper as well. That way you'll have 2 different cutting edges that you can use. All right, so now I've got the scraper set up in the vise, and we've pushed the metal up so we have a slight burr that's pointing straight up along that entire edge. We need to fold it over so the burr is on the outside. So I'm going to take my burnishing rod, and I'm going to hold it parallel to the bench. And I'm going to make 1, 2 swipes. Then I'm going to drop the handle just a few degrees and make 2 more swipes, and then just a little bit more, and I'm going to do 2 more swipes. Now at this point you should be able to feel a little bit of a burr, and that's you can hear that. You can hear the fingernails catching on that burr. You don't have it over here. Have it on this side. Now it's so small you won't be able to see it, but you should be able to feel it. So now we've got it on this side. Now I need to make a burr on the other side. So I'm going to do the same thing. Parallel. Drop this way just a couple degrees. Make a couple of swipes. And a couple more degrees. Now we have the burr over here. And that's it. Now let's test it out. All right, so to use our scraper, you want to take your fingers on either side of the front of the scraper, and on the back, you're going to put your thumbs in the middle, kind of close to the bottom of the scraper. And you're going to use your thumbs and your fingers to create just a little bit of a flex and bend in the scraper. Now, you put the scraper on the wood. If you hold it vertical like this and push forward, it's really not going to do anything. You might get a little bit of dust, but it's just going to slide along. So you start leaning the scraper forward and moving it. And at a certain point, for me, right there, I feel that burr, that hook we created, start to catch. And that's how you know how far forward to lean the scraper. You get it right there, and we push through, and we get really nice, thin, wispy shavings. And this leaves almost a glass smooth finish on the wood. It's just making wonderful shavings off this walnut. Now, after a while, you may notice the scraper starts to get a little bit dull. How you know it's dull is if you start getting dust like this instead of shavings. This means either your scraper is dull or you need to work on your technique. You might not be doing it the right angle. So you can try to adjust your angle and see if you get shavings again. But if not, it may be time to go back to the burnisher and reset the hook. All right, bonus tip time. If you're still having issues getting a sharp card scraper, there's a few things you might want to try. First, make sure you're not using too much pressure when you're trying to draw out the steel and turn the burr. It really doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to do this. So I recommend starting out with very light pressure and working your way up until you can feel that burr on the edge. The other thing to watch for is that you're not using too much of an angle whenever you're trying to turn the hook. If you have a really steep angle like this, you're turning the hook over too far and it's not going to cut into the wood. You just need a few degrees and that's all it takes. When you're sharpening your scrapers, don't forget that you can sharpen both the top and bottom of the scraper, giving you 4 total cutting edges you can use. This will make the scraper last a lot longer between having to go back and resharpen. After using the scraper for a few minutes, it's going to start heating up. So I recommend having a second scraper so you can swap one out and let it cool off while you continue to work. Another option is to use some of these small refrigerator magnets. You can slap this on the back of the scraper, right where your thumbs go, and that's going to add a little bit of extra protection for your thumbs so that they don't get too hot. So I hope I've answered everything that you need to know about card scrapers. If I missed anything or you still have questions, please let me know in the comments. If you're interested in the scrapers that I use or the burnishing tool that I have, I'll leave some links to those in the description so you can go check them out. All right, y'all, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.